It is no surprise then that Paulus, Barbara Lee, and Dina Titus, and I would urge my colleagues to support our common sense, states' rights, compassionate, fiscally responsible amendment. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserved to this time. For what purposes, gentleman from Virginia, seek recognition?
I rise in opposition to the amendment. Yield myself 1 minute. The following national medical
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
associations are currently opposed: medical marijuana, American Medical Association, American Cancer Society, American Glaucoma Society, Glaucoma Research Foundation, American Academy of Pediatrics, American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, American Psychiatric Association. Also, recent research has demonstrated that marijuana use during teen years decreases IQ rates by an average of 8 points. I would like to yield now 2 minutes to the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Harris.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. And I rise to oppose the amendment. My state's named in the amendment. Look, everyone supports compassionate, effective medical care for patients with cancer, epilepsy, chronic pain. You'll probably hear anecdotal reports, maybe even during the testimony this evening, about how medical marijuana, can solve some of these problems. But there are 2 problems with medical marijuana. First, it's the camel's nose under the tent. And second, the amendment as written would tie the DEA's hands beyond medical marijuana. With regards to the camel's nose under the tent, let me just quote from the DEA report just published this month. Organizers behind medical marijuana movement did not really concern themselves with marijuana as a medicine. They just saw it as a means to an end, which is the legalization of marijuana for recreational purposes. They did not deal with ensuring that the product meets the standards of modern medicine: quality, safety, and efficacy. Because, Mr. Chairman, the term medical marijuana is generally used to refer, and this is from the NIH, and we respect the NIH, this is the National Institute of Drug Abuse. The term medical marijuana is generally used to refer to the whole unprocessed marijuana plant or its crude extracts. And Mr. Chairman, that's not what medicine is about. Medicine is about refining the components, THC and CBD, actually making sure they're efficacious, giving the exact dose, not 2 joints a day, not a brownie here, a biscuit there. That's not modern medicine. In fact, the DEA supports those studies, looking at the safety and efficacy and dosing regimens for these, THC, CBD. They've licensed some of the drugs. Mr. Chairman, according to the National Institute of Drug Abuse, medical and street marijuana are not different. Most marijuana sold in dispensaries as medicine, again, reading from the National Institute of Drug Abuse, is the same quality and carries the same health risks as marijuana sold on the street. And Mr. Chairman, we know there are health problems. The problem is that the way the amendment is drafted in a state like Maryland, which has medical marijuana, if we ever legalized it, the amendment would stop the DEA from going after more than medical marijuana.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from
How much time do I have remaining?
2.5 minutes remaining.
Yeah, I will reserve the 2.5 minutes.
Gentleman from Virginia reserves. Gentleman from California is
And how much
recognized.
time do I have remaining?
2.5 minutes.
So we have 2.5 minutes each, all right? I would yield to my colleague from Kentucky, Mr. Massey, 1 minute.
Gentleman from Kentucky is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. I'm not here to talk about brownies and biscuits. I'm here to talk about a serious medical issue. Cannabidiol, the CBD oil that comes from the cannabis plant, is very low in THC and it is non-psychoactive. Research has shown very promising results in children with epilepsy, autism, and other neurological disorders. CBD oil is also showing promising results in adults with Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and PTSD. We need to remove the roadblocks to these potential medical breakthroughs. This amendment would do that. The federal government should not countermand state law, and in this case, the absurd result of that is that medical discoveries are being blocked. I encourage my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield back.
Reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from California reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from who seeks recognition? Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
So I have 2.5 minutes left. They have 1 minute to it.
1.5 minutes remaining for Mr.
I'll
Roberts.
reserve the balance of time to the gentleman from Louisiana, Dr. Fleming. 2.5 minutes.
Gentleman from Louisiana is recognized for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me say that in this discussion, you may have heard reference to the 10th Amendment and the Commerce Clause. Let me address that. I want to get that out of the way because I've talked tremendously over the past few days and weeks about the dangers of marijuana. This controversy became before the U.S. Supreme Court in 2005 in Gonzalez versus Raich. The Supreme Court reviewed the federal government's authority to enforce the Controlled Substances Act. In a 6-3 decision, Justice Scalia, a strong states' rights advocate, concurred with the majority, ruling that the CSA does not violate the Commerce Clause or the principles of state sovereignty. Just to read what he said, not only is it impossible to distinguish controlled substances manufactured and distributed interstate from controlled substances manufactured and distributed interstate, but it hardly makes sense to speak in such terms. Drugs like marijuana are fungible commodities. As the court explains, marijuana that is grown at home and possessed for personal use is never more than an instant from the interstate market. And this is so whether or not the possession is for medicinal use or lawful use under the laws of a particular state. And again, you know, if we want to make a statement, principle on the 10th Amendment, fine, but don't do it on the backs of our kids and our grandkids. This is dangerous for them. How do we know this? The health risks, brain development, schizophrenia, increased risk of stroke. A study at Northwestern University recently showed profound changes in the brain just in casual marijuana users. Heart complications, 3 times normal in such users. And recent studies show, as I said, not only damage in the certain structures in the brain, but the same structures that attend to motivation, which again underlines the amotivational syndrome that we've all heard about. So again, it's settled law. The Supreme Court has already spoken on the constitutionality of this. It is settled when it comes to medicine. We hear anecdotal stories, but there is no widespread accepted use of marijuana, medicinal marijuana, and so forth. There is no acceptance of this by the medical community. It's not evidence-based. Fine if you want to do research on it, but this will take away the ability of the Department of Justice to protect our young people. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from California is recognized.
I would yield 1 minute to our doctor in the House, Dr. Brown, and we do believe in the doctor-patient relationship and that the government shouldn't interfere, so Dr. Brown.
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Yes.
For 1 minute.
I'm a family physician and an addictionologist. Marijuana is addicting if it's used improperly. But used medically, and there are very valid medical reasons to utilize extracts or products from marijuana in medical procedures, is a very valid medical use under the direction of a doctor. It's actually less dangerous than some narcotics the doctors prescribe all over this country. And also, this is a states' rights, states' power issue, because many states across the country, in fact, my own state of Georgia, is considering allowing medical use under the direction of a physician. So this is a states' rights, 10th Amendment issue. We need to reserve the state's powers under the Constitution. Please support this amendment.
It's back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
I've been motivated to strike the last word.
Gentleman
I'd like to
recognized
yield
for
1
5
minute.
minutes.
To the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Blumenauer.
The gentleman cannot yield time.
Oh,
The gentleman from Oregon is recognized.
I'm going to yield approximately 1 minute. And I will reclaim my time appropriately.
The gentleman from Oregon is recognized.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the gentleman's courtesy. I'm listening to our friends on the other side of the aisle in opposition here, and the notion about camel's nose and this train has already left the station. 18 years ago, the state of California voters approved medical marijuana. We now have 22 states that are doing so. My good friend from Georgia is right. I mean, there are 1 million Americans now with the legal right to medical marijuana as prescribed by a physician. The problem is that the federal government's getting in the way. The federal government makes it harder for doctors and researchers to be able to do what I think my friend in Louisiana wants than it is for parents to self-medicate with buying marijuana for a child with violent epilepsy. This amendment is important to get the federal government out of the way, let this process work going forward where we can have respect for states' rights and something that makes a huge difference to hundreds of thousands of people around the country now and more in the future. And I thank the gentleman.
Gentlemen, and I'd like to
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
I'd like to yield a similar impulsive amount of time to the gentleman from California, Mr. Farr.
Gentleman from California is recognized.
Supported this amendment as a co-author of it, and I had to point out this is 6 Democrats and 6 Republicans that are authoring this. There's 33 states, 3 of which have just passed laws, and the governors have indicated they'll sign them. This is essentially saying, look, if you're following state law, you're a legal resident doing your business under state law, the feds just can't come in and bust you and bust the doctors and bust the patient. And it's just, let more than half the states. So you don't have to have any opinion about the value of marijuana. This doesn't change any laws. This doesn't affect one law. It just lists the states that have already legalized it through only for medical purposes, and says federal government, in those states, in those places, you can't bust people. It seems to me a practical, reasonable amendment in this time and age.
I want to offer an opportunity to speak to the gentlelady, Mrs. Titus.
Thank you. For the District of Columbia and 22 states, including Nevada, with laws in place allowing the legal use of some form of marijuana for medical purposes, this common sense amendment simply ensures that patients do not have to live in fear when following the laws of their states and the recommendations of their doctors. Physicians in those states will not be prosecuted for prescribing the substance, and local businesses will not be shut down for dispensing the same. I urge you vote in favor.
Finally, I know that the gentleman from Virginia, I'm going to allow him to close because he's at somewhat of a disadvantage. I want to yield the remaining amount of my time to the gentlelady from Oakland, Congresswoman Lee.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the gentleman for yielding and just say that I rise in strong support of this bipartisan amendment, which I am proud to co-sponsor along with my colleagues. This amendment will provide much-needed clarity to patients and businesses in my home state of California and 31 other jurisdictions that provide safe and legal access to medicine. We should allow for the implementation of the will of the voters to comply with state laws rather than undermining our democracy. In states with medical marijuana laws, patients face uncertainty regarding their treatment. Small business owners who have invested millions creating jobs and revenue have no assurances for the future. It's past time for the Justice Department to stop its unwarranted persecution of medical marijuana and put its resources where they are needed. In states with medical marijuana laws, people with multiple sclerosis and glaucoma, cancer, HIV and AIDS, and other medical issues continue to face uncertainty when it comes to accessing the medicine that they need to provide some relief. So it's time to pass this. It's time to give these patients the relief that they need. This is the humanitarian thing to do. It's the democratic thing to do. And I hope this body will vote for it and pass it on a bipartisan basis. It's long overdue. Enough is enough.
And I will yield back at this time. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Strike the requisite number of words.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I yield to the gentleman from Maryland, Dr. Harris, for 2.5 minutes.
But may not yield blocks of time. Gentleman may yield.
I yield to Dr. Harris.
Gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, marijuana is neither safe nor legal. Let's get it straight. The Controlled Substance Act makes marijuana in the United States illegal because it's not safe. And Mr. Chairman, there's more and more evidence every day that it's not safe. The effect on the brains, developing brains of teenagers and young adults is becoming more and more clear. The effect is, as the doctor from Louisiana has talked about, the effect on affect, the effect on mood, it is not safe. And Mr. Chairman, this is not a medicine. This would be like me as a physician saying, you know, I think you need penicillin, go chew on some mold. Of course I wouldn't do that. I write for 250 milligrams of penicillin, Q6 hours times 10 days. I don't write chew on a mold a couple of times a day. Mr. Chairman, why don't we have therapeutic tobacco? Nicotine, one of the substances in tobacco, purified, is actually useful as a drug to treat autosomal dominant nocturnal frontal lobe epilepsy. Nobody writes a prescription, smoke a couple of cigarettes and cure your epilepsy, but that's what we're being asked to do. And Mr. Chairman, worse than that, this blurs the line in those states that have gone beyond medical marijuana. For instance, in Colorado, under Amendment 64, a person can grow as many plants as, 6 plants under the new law for general use, but if it's medical marijuana, you can grow as many plants as you want as long as you can prove you have a medicinal use. So how is the DEA going to enforce anything when under this amendment, they are prohibited from going into that person's house growing as many plants as they want, because that's legal under the medical marijuana part of the law, not under the new law. Mr. Chairman, this is not the right place for this. The Ogden Memorandum from this administration clearly states that the Department of Justice does not prioritize prosecution for medical marijuana. Clearly states it. They don't do it. This is a problem. This is a solution in search of a problem that opens many other doors to the dangers of marijuana. I yield back.
I yield the balance of my time to Dr. Fleming from Louisiana.
Louisiana is recognized.
May I inquire as to how much time is left?
2.5 minutes.
I think my friend Mr. Wolf and I think Mr. Chairman, look, first of all, let's be clear. Marijuana is an addicting substance. It's Schedule 1. It's against federal law. It was passed that way into the CSA in 1970. And what this amendment would do is it wouldn't change the law. It would just make it difficult, if not impossible, for the DEA and the Department of Justice to enforce the law. Now, members on my side have been criticizing President Obama for selective enforcement of Obamacare and for immigration and other laws like that. So now we're going to start going down the road of selective enforcement for our drug policy. Now, medicinal marijuana. What is it exactly? Folks, I can tell you it is nothing more than the run around the laws against the legalization of marijuana. There is nothing medical or medicinal about it. It is not accepted by physicians. Oh, somebody claims it may do something for glaucoma, perhaps. Well, maybe it will, maybe it won't. But there are a lot more drugs that do a much better job than that, and they're much safer. But the most important thing I want everybody to know, Mr. Chairman, today, is the fact that marijuana is highly addicting. It is the most common diagnosis for addiction in admissions to rehab centers for young people. Why in the world do we want to take away drug enforcement and leave our young people out there vulnerable? Yes, you say it can only be used by adults. Well, if it's sitting around on shelves at home, the kids are going to get into it. We're already hearing about Colorado, fourth graders dealing with it. We hear about more poisonings in the emergency room. And if you look at other places that have gone down this road, like Alaska, they've retracted from their legalization. So I don't think we should accept it at all that this is history in the making and that we're never going to go back. You look at Amsterdam. They have put a lot more restrictions back into control, even in that very, very liberal nation. So for that and many reasons, I would just say tonight, from a legal standpoint, this amendment would not be constitutional. Our laws are currently constitutional, as found so in 2005 by the Supreme Court. And this is an extremely dangerous drug for our children and future adults and future generations. And with that, I yield the remainder of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from California is recognized for 30 seconds.
And is this the close of the debate?
The gentleman's correct.
All right, thank you. This is the most incredible debate we've had. Over half the states have already gone through every argument that was presented and decided against what you just heard. There are doctors in every one of those states that participated in a long debate over this and found exactly the opposite of what we've heard today. Some people are suffering, and if a doctor feels that he needs to prescribe something to alleviate that suffering, it is immoral for this government to get in the way. And that's what's happening. The state governments have recognized that a doctor has a right to treat his patient any way he
time has
sees fit,
expired.
and so do our founding fathers. I ask for support for my amendment.
Question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. The opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to.
Ask for a roll call vote on that.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California will be postponed.